Chief, Chaplain Franz, Chaplain Painter, colleagues, friends. I want to share a couple things before I dive into the brief that I think are very important from where I'm standing. A couple of those things have been mentioned already today, yesterday, and that is this. I look across as an older colonel, mentioned earlier, infantryman. I know many of you. Some of you, you and I have walked the same ground together, deployed various assignments and things. Many of you, though, I don't know. But for those that I do, I wanted to say unashamedly from this old guy up front, I love you. I love you. Love is not a four-letter word. It is, but it's not. Love is not separate from professionalism. And because you love, you can still maintain standards. But we're doing life together. And if we can't love those around us in that process, something's wrong. In my faith, you lay down your life for those who you love. That's the kind of team I want to be a part of, where I love those around me and they love me as well. That's going to connect with what I'm going to share with you today about culture. A couple months ago, Chaplain Kitchens asked me to present at the summit on how Global Strike led some culture change over the 3 years that I was there. As mentioned, I PCS'd about a month ago, now at the Joint Staff, but spent 3 incredible years, a privilege to be a part of Air Force Global Strike Command and be involved in some great things. But up front, what I'm going to share with you today, I actually had a smaller part in. It was a huge team effort. Many of those members now are not in our Corps anymore. Chief Master Sergeant Steve Beasley, my RST partner, is now retired. He's still in the Corps. He was followed on by what and how he describes his spouse as the better Beasley. She came up from the wing level to assist in our office. Master Sergeant or Senior Select, Jessica Beasley, she was a part of it as well. Chaplain Glenn Bright was a part of it. Chaplain Steve Cuneo, a part of it. Tech Sergeant Victoria Camarillo, who is retired, was a huge part of the effort. All of that together with our civilian, who we affectionately call Q, really were the workhorses that put all of this together. I just happened to be a part of it. Now, with that as well, I want to say that we did some things in Global Strike that we hope made a difference. The other MAGCOMs and field comms did incredible things as well. It's not just a Global Strike thing. I say that to say get with those incredible MAGCOM, field comm, senior RST members because they have incredible wisdom. Over the last few years as a colonel, I've been able to hang out with a lot of senior RSTs at that level. Incredible people, both on the enlisted side and the officer side. And if you don't tap into them, you're going to lose out. Just a privilege to be a part of some of those meetings with the incredible, not only cognitive skills of the members, but how passionately they care about our chaplain corps. And that they want the chaplain corps to succeed, as described by Chaplain Stendhal, one of my heroes, above and beyond whether they get the accolades or the promotions. That's how much that your senior leaders care about you. So I say that to say, yes, Global Strike, and we'll talk about that, other resources out there, and many more intelligent than I. So with that, if you could go to the next slide, please. So what I'm going to talk about briefly, what is culture? If we're going to try to change it, we have to have a foundational understanding of what it is. Secondly, and my points here, the second point and the fourth point are the most important. These are the points that you can take with you when you go home. and do some of this stuff at your location. The second point, driving culture transformation in Global Strike at the Chaplain Corps level, the why of it. Why did we do that? Thirdly, I'm going to share with you some of the whats that we did. Now, this was driven by our context. So many of the things that we did in Global Strike, you might not or cannot do where you're at. It worked, though, in Global Strike for us. And then, after some of the what, the how. How can you take this back and start or continue culture change at your location to get to re-image HC culture where you're at? Then after that, just a couple of thoughts from the journey along the way, and then if we have some time for some discussion, questions, comments, that kind of thing. So with that, let's go to the next slide. What is culture? One more, please. There we go, thanks. Edgar Schein, MIT, Harvard guy, wrote all kinds of things on culture, and he boiled it down to 3 levels. One of those levels are the artifacts of the organization in which you serve. Artifacts are like the visible signs of an organization. Our uniforms separate us into a particular culture. Our language, we have a different language, right? Did you PCS or did you TDY? If you PCS'd, you probably did a PPM. If you did a PPM, then you had to submit a DD 1351 in the system to the MPF. But if you went TDY, you had to work DTS and use your GTC, right? Now, the scary thing about that is you all understood what I meant by that. Try it at your next family reunion and see what happens. We have our own language. We have other things as well, our manners of address that are unique in our culture. Posters, observable things. Like I lived on Barksdale, and every morning we had what? Reveille. We had retreat. We had taps at 2100, which created a particular kind of culture. I had visitors in one time. They heard retreat. They came in, they said, "Is the base under attack?" I said, "No, they're just lowering the colors at the end of the day. It's part of our military culture." That's what people see, the artifacts. The second level are our espoused beliefs and values. These are things like our core values. These are in the Chaplain Corps, caring for airmen, guardians, and families more than anyone thinks possible. These are our posters that put up about who we are that separates us from others. If I say to you integrity first, you can fill in the last parts of that. Those are our espoused beliefs and our values. Then thirdly, Schein says there's another level. It's basic underlying assumptions of how the organization over many years has coalesced to be successful. In the military, we have some of those, but at that level, it's more difficult to see because it's become a part of who we are. The unwritten rules of the organization, the hidden things. I don't know if I remember in the military being, on a poster, be on time for meetings, but it's an underlying assumption that you are on time, right? Or if you're on time, you're late to that particular meeting. Or as the corporate world has gone to calling everybody by their first name, even if you're the CEO, there's an assumption within the military that you're not going to do that, right? It would be even unconscionable or not even on my radar to think that I'm going to call Chaplain Kitchens by his first name. We just don't do that in the military. I couldn't imagine going to Global Strike and General Ray calling him by his first name. Well, I guess I did because his first name's General, right? I realized general officers had actual real names besides that. But there are underlying assumptions that every organization has, and the leaders need to understand what those are. And why is because leaders need to change the culture. You can't do it if you don't understand where that culture is. Okay. Now, secondly, I threw this up for us older folks, Encyclopedia Britannica. Anybody heard that term before? Yeah, it's all the older folks in the room. Simply put, a way of thinking, behaving, or working that exists in a place or organization. And then lastly, bare bones, the way we do things around here is our culture. Next slide, please. The drivers. Now, this is for Air Force Global Strike Command. The why. Now, with that, when I came into Global Strike in 2020, there was a certain geopolitical environment that was happening. And it was Russia, China, North Korea was happening at that time. That was markedly different than the past 20 years of where our Air Force had been. So the world moved on, but the Air Force and Global Strike Command did not. The culture did not adapt or align with where the world was. General Ray said, we have to get ahead of this. General Ray, the Global Strike Commander, said, because the world has moved on. That was a huge driver for us in Global Strike, and I'll share a little bit more about that in a little bit as well. Now, the commander, when the commander gets behind something, half the work is done. General Ray saw this, and he said, this is where Global Strike is to meet the needs of the next few years. This is where Global Strike has to go. And I'm going to explain the two charts there in just a moment, so hang on with me. But then you had, at the same time, Secretary Kendall, who was here yesterday, say, war with Russia or China is not unlikely. It could happen anytime. Wow. Then General Brown says, accelerate change or lose. General Ray's motto was compete or die. And we're not ready to compete yet. So you can see how these are coalescing into drivers from on high to say, we're not where we need to be in Air Force Global Strike Command to meet the needs and the requirements of today. So we have to get after what that is. So what happened was a huge initiative in Global Strike, command-wide, of changing Global Strike's nature, which is striker culture, if you've heard that, begun by General Ray. And what happened was, the one on the left was the assessment of where Global Strike was in 4 quadrants of culture. And then on the right was where Global Strike needed to go, the change that needed to happen. Now, I put these up here that you're not going to be, experts in these two charts. What I wanted to show, though, was in the bottom left corner of the left chart, it says that the current state of Global Strike is very hierarchical. You see that? Much of the pie is in the hierarchical. Right? We're the military. The military is very control-oriented, very hierarchical. But all the research came back saying to get to where you need to go, Global Strike, you need to move to more of a collaborative culture. That's the one on the right. You see where the quadrilateral shifted upwards, where it's more of a pie in the collaborative vein? Now, what does collaborative mean? It means you have to empower airmen. You have to give them more control over decision making. Like we're talking E4s, O1s, O2s. And you have to collaborate instead of being top down. To be agile enough, to get the ideas out there, to innovate to such a level that Global Strike now can compete and not lose. You have to become less hierarchical, less controlling. You know how difficult that is for a military organization that's been steeped in control for hundreds of years. That's the backbone, really. But General Ray said it has to be done or we're going to lose. We're going to lose. Okay. Next slide, please. It's the build. Interesting fact. In the process of determining where Global Strike needed to go, this was uncovered. You might have seen this before. The Leadership Manual of the Air Force in 1948 As compared to the leadership manual in 2011, the words under 1948 that were in the leadership manual for commanders, you see how many times these words are referenced in that leadership manual. Love, 13 times. I mean, love has to do with leadership and culture and how we get after the mission. This is right after World War II. And then on the right side, how many times is love mentioned? 0. 0. Now I ask you, which side is more human-centered? Okay. Next slide, please. The great thing about Global Strike is General Cotton was General Ray's DCOM. He continued it. He changed the motto to always ready. General Boussier now is the commander, kept always ready. They all understood what was needed. Another driver then, we have the geopolitical environment. We've got the Global Strike Commander. Now we have the Chaplain Corps coming along and saying we need to change as well. Now, 2020 was prior to all of this being codified, re-image HC culture, but we were paying attention to what the chiefs of chaplains were saying. Where did we need to go? Chief Chambers as well, Chief Gray as well. We were putting that all together. Now, I say all that to say this. Our team got together, did a 3-day offsite, shut the doors, and said, we're going to put all this information together. What does that mean for us in the Chaplain Corps of Global Strike? They did incredible work. Incredible work. And the 3 things that popped out are there on the screen. The ideas, the concepts that we needed to infuse into the culture of Air Force Global Strike Command, on top of the things we were doing every day, rituals, rites, all the things the Chaplain Corps does. One was we need to infuse caring. Care. Great thing is we could define what that was. What did that look like? Care is linked to respect. Care is another 4-letter word. Love, care, respect. Secondly, readiness. It's all about readiness, right? It's all about readiness. What does readiness look like in Global Strike? To missileers or B-52 folks. And then thirdly, development or mentoring and fairness on what the next generation of the Chaplain Corps members are going to be like, look like, and be trained to in the standard. We put all of that together, and the team came up with this. Next slide, please. Okay. I'm not going to lead you through this slide. I just wanted to show you what we came up with as our 4 LOEs. What's important with this is that once we did this, we went into General Ray's office, said, sir, this is what we want to do as your Chaplain Corps, with your intent, with the way the Chaplain Corps is going, with what's happening in the world. This is how we heard you, and we translated it into how we can actually operationalize parts of this: caring, development, authentic leadership, dignity, trust, all of those kinds of things. Okay? Next slide, please. From the why to the what. Now, once we designed the slide and are way ahead with our 4 LOEs, we socialized it with AFHC, HCP, that they were on board with us. Then we went to US Stratcom. Where's Chaplain Giannone? Yeah, he's in the back. Thanks, Chaplain Giannone. We say, hey, this is what we're thinking, because we had a combatant command piece to this as well, and Sergeant Loden later on also. And then we got them on board as well. Why? Because when you do things like this, communication is critical. And to get those stakeholders on board with culture change is not just critical, it is an imperative. You cannot move an organization forward if you don't have the key people on board. There's no way to do it. And you'll see that in a little bit. Now, I go to the what. The why piece, and you all have that still. We still have all of those drivers. You have a commander pushing. I know Chaplain Newton at AMC's got a commander that's way out there. I think we have those things in place that can help us drive the culture change. We have a chaplain corps now that solidified many of these things we're talking about over the last couple of years. That's now in place for us. Now you at your location can take all of that and fashion it to your context to change the culture in which you live. Now, these are some of the things that we did and put into place. Number one, we said as part of caring, we are going to be deliberate about onboarding and offboarding. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on the what's here, but we would bring every new senior RST member coming into Global Strike. We had a plan that we would bring them in on, checklist, the calls, the emails that would go to them. We welcomed them in. The first chat, though, we had with them was about their family, not about the mission. We did that deliberately. We wanted to put up front with them, you're important. We'll get to the mission. But you as a human being first, we want to know about you. I asked my spouse, she was great. She sent cards to the spouses, welcoming them into Global Strike. Gave her email up. She's still in email connection with many of them, even though we're not in Global Strike anymore. That this is a special place you're coming into. We value you when you come into Global Strike. Same on the way out, offboarding. But why did we do that from the headquarters to senior RST members? One, we wanted to welcome people in. We wanted to do that. Secondly, we wanted to show the wings, go and do likewise with the folks that come to you on your teams. We wanted to model that from the headquarters. Secondly, the LOEs. Don't go back to the last slide. You have that, the slide. What we did was, with the wing chaplains, it was so important, and some of them are in this room right now. They remember probably painstakingly. I took that slide, and I, as their MAGCOM chaplain, asked to sit with them on a Teams meeting with the video on, and I walked them through that slide over an hour and a half. I said, this is where we are at the headquarters. I talked with them about how they can potentially fit into this, trying to do one thing, for them to buy in. And when I went through that process with every one of them, at the end, I said this. I said, I'm not ordering you to do this. I can't order you to do this. MAGCOM chaplains really don't have a whole lot of authority, actually, on their own. I know, shh. What I'm asking you to do is see this for yourself and take it on for yourself and your team, because it's the right thing to do. To buy into it. To own it for yourself. Now, before they made the decision, I said to them, be careful, because if you say, yes, I'm into this is what it means. It's going to cost you. You're going to need to do some shifting here. And to a wing chaplain, they said yes. They said, yes, we're going to do this at our location. And so that communication, the buying in, the key stakeholders, incredibly important to culture change. Thirdly, one of the things that we did was the assumption of the stole ceremony, or crook ceremony. We wanted to highlight the importance of the chaplain corps, specifically the wing chaplain. And so whenever we had a new wing chaplain come in, Chief Beasley and I would fly to the location after we talked to the wing commander and say, we want to do a special ceremony to highlight the importance of the chaplain corps at your location, the importance of religious affairs airmen, the importance of the wing chaplain and chaplains to the entire community. It was mirrored after a change of command ceremony. The superintendent of that location had a part in it similar to the first sergeant does. Chief Beasley, my partner, would be the narrator. The wing commander was a part of the ceremony. And it was really bestowing that special highlighted emphasis of what the spiritual leader for the community is and will be. And I think it was meaningful for the people that were a part of it. I know it was for the wing commanders, because invariably after these ceremonies, they would come up to me and say, Chaplain, I never realized how much they did, how much responsibility the wing chaplain has, and how much I can utilize them and the religious affairs airmen here at my location. We had fashioned, and next slide, please. We had fashioned for them a stole made out of OCP material with the wing patch and the chaplain corps patch on. And in the ceremony, we would place that on. As you see Chaplain Holmes there from Barksdale. And so the wing commander is there placing this on as a symbol of the spiritual leadership of the wing chaplain. And then the picture on the right, Chaplain Rios as well, at Dyess Air Force Base. Small things, actually, that help turn the culture of the chaplain corps within Global Strike. And I mention them because at breaks or something, if you want to talk with them about that, they'll be happy to talk with you, I'm sure. Next slide, please. Deliberate and fair mentoring and development. Very, very important. Deliberate and fair mentoring and development. We were serious about, in Global Strike, giving opportunities to everyone at each level and what that looked like, whether you're an enlisted member or as an officer. And we codified that. We kept track of it. We assessed that within Global Strike. Next, we also wanted to communicate a message from the MAGCOM, and again, changing culture, of call us, we're actually there to help you. Now, I say that because I think my contemporaries, the 06 and the E8s and E9s, it shifted from when I was a captain. As a new captain, I had a wing chaplain tell me one time, we don't call command. That you just don't do that. When I was a young captain, they call us. And I knew what that meant. It's one of those things as a young leader, you say to yourself deep down, if I'm ever in that position, I'm going to do something different. And so I was there. I said, we're going to work hard at flipping that on its head. I want our wings to call us. How can we do that? How can we create that culture to do that? I think that we did it. And if there's a Global Strike wing chaplain in here, if we didn't, talk to them, talk to me kind of thing. And how did we know that? They were calling us every week, and that's great. It also gave us an opportunity to develop them and mentor them, because new wing chaplains, when they call, they don't do it consciously, but they call wanting us to fix their problems. That was a great way for us to develop them and say to them, I can't do it for you, but I can give you advice. And these are the COAs that you have. And it was shaping them and forming them and growing them, or a superintendent. Getting them to understand the influence that they actually had and the responsibilities that they carried at the wing, which are tremendous. And so they called us. The next point, and Chaplain Danford, I know he's not here, he told me he had to step out. Reservists and IMAs. We made a conscious effort to change the culture surrounding our reservists. If you're a reservist coming into Global Strike, you were going to be used. Not as a second-class citizen, you were going to be, like I think I scared my IMA because I said, I'm going on leave, you're here, you're now the command chaplain. You're going into the meeting, you make the decisions. You don't need to call me, kind of a thing, which empowered them to feel like they were full-up team members. That was a culture change from how I grew up in our chaplain corps with reservists that just covered counseling, and that counseling, there's nothing wrong with counseling. But our reservists can do way more, is what I thought. And with that, we worked hard at earning MPA days because we wanted to share that across the command. When I first came to Global Strike, there was a real dearth of MPA days across the Air Force, I think. I think the last year I was there, and this was Chief Beasley. He dove into this. We had almost 3,000 MPA days that we used in Global Strike. And to me, that translates into caring for airmen, guardians, and families more than anyone thinks possible. You know, I told General Cotton once, I said, sir, yeah, we could use money, but not as much as manpower. We're about people. If you give me another religious affairs airman or another chaplain, I could do incredible things. I believe that. And so the MPA days were an expression of that, an extension of that piece. Let me go to the SAVs. I'm going to come to the personal slide a little bit, and I'm going to move more quickly here. All the MAJCOMs and field coms do SAV, staff assistant visits. We wanted to be very intentional with it to model what a great RST looks like. Chief and I, when we go out, active listening. Chaplain Frick, many years ago, pulled me aside. He said, if you ever get into that position, you go do a SAV, and you talk with a member one-on-one, do one thing. Tell them thank you for their service, and then shut up and listen. That's what he said. So I tried to honor that. Just listen to where our members are. That's a form of validating and changing a culture. As if the headquarters has all the answers. We don't. We don't have all the answers. And then the last piece there, before I go to the personal slide, the commanders. Very important to socialize this with the commanders. Where's Chaplain Chelf at? I know, Chaplain Chelf. I remember being at F.E. Warren. We had just done the Assumption of the Stole ceremony. We met with the wing commander. We're in the meeting. She's there, and I'm sharing with her some of the slides. She doesn't know it, but I'm sharing with her some of the slide about how the Chaplain Corps can really add value in a wartime crisis situation. I talked about a mass cow happening at F.E. Warren. 400 airmen die, wounded in action after that kind of thing. And she gets it. She has like an aha moment. She turns to the vice. I don't know if you remember this, Chaplain Shelf. She turns to the vice and says, put the Chaplain Corps on all the exercise stuff, kind of thing. And I knew at that moment she got it. Yeah, she was there. All right, next slide, please. This is something that Chief and I hit it one more time, the slide, because we lost something in translation. Okay, go back. Go back, please. Thanks. It's not what it looks like. The program has messed it up. Let me share with you what it is. We determined, even when I was in AFCENT, because Chief Beasley and I were in AFCENT together, senior RST, we got to Global Strike. We had up front something we called the personal slide. This was something we had every team member fill out, from the lowest ranking to the highest, on who they were. What did they want to do in 5 years? What were things special to them? And we determined it was so important. We wanted to show how much we cared about them that this is the first thing we did when we walked through the door on the SAV, was put the slides up, and then that person, that E3 or that O2, O3, would stand up and brief their slide and talk about who they were and what they liked and their pets and that kind of thing. That turned out to be transformational. At the end of the slide presentation, and I share this one, I got Chief's permission to share his. This is a slide he used, kind of. It's a little off. But invariably, I would ask a question on the teams. Did anyone here learn anything else about their teammates they didn't know prior? Every hand would go up. They didn't know their team members on that level yet. And that was part of our initiative to say to our members, we want to know who you are beyond the uniform as a human being. We care about you on that level. You're just not a capability to us at the headquarters. You're a flesh and blood human being. And we wanted to honor who they were and their family. That connects with the family dinners. I wanted to have a family dinner on the SAV. We tried to do potlucks to save money because I wanted to look into every family member's eyes and say thank you. Thank you for supporting, and you get the raw end of the deal often. You don't get much of a say, in what happens. And I know for the military member to have an incredible Air Force career, they have to have a family that's on board with that. So it was very important for Chief and I to look them in the eye and say that. Again, creating that culture of airmen, guardians, and families more than anyone thinks possible. Okay, go to the next slide, please. Got about 9 minutes left. The communicator. Edgar Schein, the first guy, the MIT guy, he found out in his research that if you want to shift culture, subordinates will pay attention to what leaders pay attention to. Resources, what leaders control, and what they manage. And so on the communicator, which was something that the wings would send us every month, they would give us like a status of where they were. We deliberately used the communicator to show them what was important to us. We inserted readiness. We put a block at the bottom of how did you care for airmen and families more than anyone thinks. How did you do that in the past month? Okay. To show our wings what we felt was important, to shift that culture. Okay. Again, these are some of the small things that we did. Next slide, please. We hired a readiness civilian. Does that say important? We hired a readiness civilian. We sent Chaplain Corps members to that new FC hostile course that now is being reshaped. We sent them to the course with no money. We had to go get the funding to do it. It was so important that we went to the commander and said, sir, we've got to do this. Why do you need to do this? Well, if you look back at the 4 LOEs we had and you approved, this is very important kind of thing. CPO training, clinical pastoral orientation for our religious affairs airmen outside of Whiteman. We went and got the funding for that. Why? Because it was important. And if readiness is important, then the organization will do what it needs to do to get our people trained in it. Next point, whenever Chief and I did SABs, we would give the senior RSTs leadership books. I hope they read them. I encourage them to read them. Why? Changing culture. The wing chaplain and superintendent are critical to success in this new model. They have to be trained to a level of leadership that probably when I was a wing chaplain, the requirement was very different. Less of a requirement. Now the wing chaplain, superintendent, you have to be an expert in all kinds of things. So we wanted to help equip them with that. We shifted the AMP. The AMP shows what you're supposed to be doing for that year or 2 years. And sometimes we would get our AMPs to the headquarters and in the validation process, and many of the AMPs wouldn't have readiness on it. So we would just send it back to them and say, we know readiness is important to you, but it's not reflected in the AMP. Can you update it? Oh, of course we can. Of course we can. And so they would do that. It's a shift within our AMPs of what's most important. And then the last two things, I'll just spend a minute on number 5. We had a readiness conference in September of a year, and we were fighting for the funding to do that. That's another culture shift. We brought in RSTs from every wing. Sergeant Loden was there. Chaplain Bodwell came as well. That was a huge lift. But it showed to our team members how important, again, this readiness thing is and continues to be. From that, we said to them, this is not a one and done. We're targeting Global Thunder 23, which is the global strike, big, huge exercise that's happening. The Chaplain Corps is going to be a player in that. We asked the wings to get SIPR accounts. This is that mental readiness, mental mindset again. They all did that. Then we started having secure VTCs. It's difficult to have a secure VTC at a wing. I realized that. We knew that up front. There's usually 1 or 2 locations maybe on a wing to do that. We held monthly SVTCs to get ready for the exercise, but also to inculcate that readiness mindset of this is really important. But one of the things we did as well at the Readiness Conference, we told them, working with Chaplain Giannone at US Stratcom, there are going to be scenarios put into the exercise that are chaplain core. We're going to give you the scenarios up front. You're going to know what they are. We're not going to surprise you. It's not going to be a gotcha kind of thing. We want you to have 100% success in this. We published those scenarios prior and allowed them to work through and get to the right solutions, because that's where the goodness came when the teams got together and thought deeply about readiness and what that meant for our chaplain corps. We went through Global Thunder 23. Scenarios, all of that, the wings utilizing our teams to a wing chaplain. They learned incredible. Talk to them. There are many here in the room. But again, changing the culture. Okay. Next slide, please. Very quickly, the how process. John Cotter wrote a book called Leading Change. It transformed organizational leadership, I believe it was 1995. He gave the process on actually how to create culture change. He said, 1, you start with a sense of urgency. You have that already, the drivers. I gave them to you. You were here yesterday. 2, create that guiding coalition. I had the commander on board, the DCOM on board, the command chief on board, the chief of staff, Stratcom, AFHC, when we launched it, all the key stakeholders on board. 3, you develop that vision and strategy. We did our LOEs. There's a poem behind those 4 LOEs. And then number 4, you communicate that vision. We started doing that. 2, 3, and 4 go together, the process. Step number 5, there are always going to be barriers. Funding, we can't do it. We've never done it that way before. I don't want to do it. Those kinds of things, you have to work through those. Work through those barriers. Number 6, generate short-term wins. Very, very important. People have to see progress. It's human nature. Stole ceremonies. A PCS. We had a member, I think Secretary Kendall mentioned it yesterday, at F.E. Warren that was being discriminated against. Children in the schools. Working with Chaplain Thomas and DPMH and his team, we worked to have that member and his family with an assignment out of F.E. Warren in 1 day to a location the member wanted to go to. That's caring for airmen and families. 1 day. And Chaplain Thomas's team came through with that when the commander said, I want to get this person out. Him and his family. The family dinners. Number 7, build on the change. I wish I had more time to talk about those things. Chaplain Croft is here from Whiteman. He can talk about community partnerships. Chaplain Holmes as well, and others. Chaplain Rios as well at Dias. Community partnerships. Ellsworth with their readiness training. And then lastly, you've got to anchor it in the culture. It has to outlive those that started it. Chaplain Gaither assured me he's going to continue the Assumption ceremonies. Forget Kelley ever existed. Just keep going with that culture change. Build on it. Make it better. Fix everything that I broke, right? Kind of a thing. And I'll throw Chief Beasley in there as well. All right. Next slide, please. Last thoughts. Culture change is really difficult. Truth in advertising. Research says only 30% of culture change initiatives actually work. 70% fail. Number 2, the senior leaders must be on board. When you leave here on Thursday or Friday, it's critical whether you, as a senior RST member, buy into what Chaplain Kitchens and Chief Chambers have talked about up here. If you don't, it will not work. It will not work. The key stakeholders have to be on. And even Cotter said 75% buy-in from all key stakeholders. You must create that. It takes a lot of communication, a lot of meetings, a lot of office stuff, that kind of thing. Never underestimate the magnitude of the forces that reinforce complacency and that help maintain the status quo. And then lastly, If you think about it, the essence of leadership in its very basic form is moving the organization forward. That's culture change. Where will your culture be when you leave the current organization which you serve? Will it be aligned? Will it be the same? Will it even go backwards? With that, that's all I have. God bless you. Thank you for the opportunity, Chief, of being a part. It's an honor to be a part of this incredible, esteemed group. God bless.